their bakor smells real exotic, like when you go in there, you want to start dancing or something. Hello to the family on Facebook and YouTube. I've been chatting away here with the folks on TikTok where I look better. I look prettier on TikTok. So y'all know that when I'm over here looking at my TikTok screen is because I like the way I look. I look prettier on my TikTok screen. So no slights to you guys on YouTube and Facebook. I just looking over here where I look so young and smooth and blemish free. Okay. So today's topic, we're going to talk about dealing with your spiritual grief and how to deal with it spiritually. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Tochi, aka Papa Dr. Tochi, mama of the men's and the women's. Okay. I'm a spiritual practitioner, teacher, coach, counselor. And my website is tochi.us, tochi.us. Actually, if you went to drtochi.com, I think you should find me. I was talking about that with somebody the other day, and the person says, "Why isn't your website Dr. Tochi?" And I said, "Actually, if someone types DRTOCHI, they will end up on my website. Believe it or not, it's just that I've had Tochi.us for so long, and I'm so used to saying go to my website at Tochi.us. But actually, if you type DRTOCHI, .com, you should be able to find me. If you type drtochi.us, you should be able to find me. Okay. If you don't find me, then I don't know what else to tell you. Okay. For those of you wondering why am I in a cloud of smoke, um, I'm burning some bakur here. So um, I want here to smell fabulous where we're having the conversation. If you need to get your drink and your snack, please do go ahead and do that. If you need to get your notebook and your pen, please go ahead and do that. And we'll go ahead and start the class. On my website, I do have products and services. I have white chalk and the red camwood. I have these bracelets, not this rose one, but these other ones for protection and favor. I also have the rings if you prefer the ring. I also have the protection and favor soap. I have the authentic African white chalk. So if you're into African traditional religions, you should know how to use the African white chalk. Okay. And the red camwood. I think I have some yellow camwood somewhere. That you know what? That I don't know if this is burning my eyes or if I'm going crazy. That's a lot of smoke. Let me see here. And if you want to book a consultation with me, you can do that through my website, tochi.us. It came to my attention that some folks from Canada were having issues trying to purchase things from my website. If you are, thank you, Josephine Lackey, for sharing. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Hello, matey. Um, if you're from Canada and you have issues ordering from the site, please send me an email. Let's see what to do about that because I think there's some people from Canada having issues um, placing orders on my website, and we've been trying to work around that. I'm also on YouTube. If you're a YouTuber, I have a plethora of over 1,000 videos on YouTube on practical spirituality. I also have membership if you're interested in that, and that's on Patreon. So you can also find me on Patreon. Just type dr underscore tochi, or just look for Dr. Tochi. You'll find me there. So let's get into today's topic. Yesterday during Touching Base, I did talk about, I did briefly touch on grief and the need for ceremonies and rituals that honor grief. And I did talk about how in our culture, which is the Western culture, okay, we tend to ignore we tend to ignore the need to grieve. We are like, oh, I got to get back to business as soon as possible. And some of us come from cultures that would traditionally grieve. Hold on, TikTok people. I moved the table and I moved the table and it wasn't kind to the camera. Here we go. Sorry. Okay. So some of us come from traditions or cultures that grieve and are not ashamed to grieve. Okay. But we come to live in the Western world, and in the Western world, grief is something that is considered a private thing. Okay. So in the Western world here, it's not always, um, it's frowned upon to grieve publicly. People expect you to get over it as quickly as possible. Oh, don't let people see you. You know, they'll say something like that. Don't let people see you. Um, don't let the children see you. Don't let your spouse see you. Don't let the other person see you. Get yourself together. Um, stop crying. You know, things of that nature. And that's really unfortunate because in my consulting, I see people who are grieving. And I see, thank you for the goat, Don Bryan. Thank you very much. I even see guys who are grieving who don't even know that they're grieving. There are guys who are grieving and they don't even know that they're grieving. And by guys, I mean men. There are men who are grieving and they don't even know that they're grieving. And they will say, oh, I'm under stress. I don't know what's going on with me. I think I'm having a health episode. And they have all kinds of excuses and explanations for what they're going through. Okay, they have all kinds of explanations for what they're going through. And they will say, but they don't realize that they're grieving. And many men, okay, many men, regardless of their cultural background, also come from this background where they are not encouraged to grieve. Okay. I'm trying to make sure I charge this thing before it starts messing up. Hold on. I want to charge this thing. I'm not seeing here that it's charging. I do hope it's charging. How do I know if it's charging? Well, we'll find out if it's charging or not. If everything goes black, then we know that it's not charging. So many men, regardless of their race or ethnicity, um, come from a patriarchal system that says men don't cry. If you're a real man, you shouldn't let people see you cry. You shouldn't let people see you grieve, and that's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate because that's not true, and that's not healthy. Okay, so We need to understand that grief is a natural human emotion, and it doesn't matter what your gender is or what your gender is not. It doesn't matter what gender you claim. It doesn't matter what ethnicity you claim. It doesn't matter what religion or spiritual path you claim. You are subject to grief. Okay? You are subject to grief. Okay? If something hurts you, your first instinct is to grieve that thing that hurts you. Okay? If something hurt you, your first instinct is to react with pain. Okay? And so it's nothing to be ashamed of or embarrassed about. Why would people experience grief? A lot of grief comes from loss. Okay? So it can be the loss of somebody, loss of a family member, loss of a parent, loss of a spouse, loss of a child, loss of a grandchild, loss of a companion or partner, loss of a pet. I have a pet I lost when I was 14, and it still hurts when I think about her, and I'm well beyond 14. Okay. Forget this makeup and stuff that I have on. I am well beyond 14 years of age. Okay. You're right, loss of a best friend. There are sometimes we will grieve for someone we don't know. We hear their story. Maybe we saw it on TikTok or YouTube or on the news, and there's something about that person's loss that triggers our own loss. Okay. Hold on. You see that thing I was talking about yesterday? I will start a live and then I'll start sweating. I will start a live and then start sweating. And then I'll thank you. Thank you, woman she, for the gift. I will start sweating. And then after a while I know I'm going to start feeling cold. It's just ridiculous. Woman she, look at this. Thank you for the goats. OMG. I got 15 goats. It's gonna be a goat eating week again. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate you. So, there are sometimes we will see someone else's story and it triggers something in us, and then we start feeling grief. There are some people who are very empathic, and when they hear about someone else's loss, they themselves will start grieving on behalf of the person, even though it's somebody they don't know. Even though it's somebody they don't know. There's some people who are like that. They feel deeply. And so when they see someone else suffering, they grieve. There are some people who look at the underprivileged, people who are children who are suffering, and they start grieving. Okay. There was a young man that I posted Okay, there was a thank you. Thank you for the extra goats, woman she. I appreciate you. Thank you. There's a picture of a young man that I posted on my platforms a few days ago, and his picture won the World Press Photo. Okay, was a young Palestinian boy, 9 years old, with both of his arms gone. Both of his arms. And if you go on my platform, you will see I posted the picture. And I remember seeing this picture. They interviewed this young man on Al Jazeera, 9 years old. I felt a sense of grief. Just, I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. I felt a sense of grief just reading his story and listening to his interview. I don't know him, but I felt a sense of grief because I know what it feels like to lose a child. Believe it or not, people can grieve when they lose a job. There's a job they've been working. They thought they were going to have a career there. They thought they were going to have some longevity on that job. They um, put their heart and soul into that job, did their best for that job, and get let go, or they got fired, or they had to leave the job. And then there's a sense of grief on losing that job. And oftentimes, when we leave a job, we already feel some kind of way. We feel sad. Sometimes we feel hurt, depending on the circumstances under which we left that job. But we live in a society, in a world, let me just not say society, we live in a world where we identify ourselves through our jobs. Many of us have no other identity outside of our jobs. So, yes, who are you? We don't say, I'm a powerful black woman. We don't say, I'm an amazing man. We usually say, hi, I'm a doctor. I'm a spiritual practitioner. I'm a teacher. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I'm a husband. We identify ourselves with our roles. And so when we lose that role, there's oftentimes a sense of grief. When we're forced to leave a career or a job through which we identified ourselves, there's often a sense of grief. I can't identify myself with this thing anymore. I've lost my identity. And so people are sad, okay? And they grieve that. They miss being able to identify themselves by that role. And there was there was there was a TikTok video that I saw of a young man who um, showed the birth of his little daughter, and he spent a lot of time with his little daughter, carrying her around and things like that, and then showed where she was buried. And he was Muslim, and he said, Alhamdulillah, I know that I've lost you, but I want to thank you for making me a father. I want to thank you for allowing me to be called a father. I wasn't a father before you came. And after you came, and even though you've left, you made me a father. You made me a father. And so you have that. Same thing for the women. Um, Getting a divorce, people can grieve over that. They may have a divorce party. They may have a divorce photo shoot. There was a video I saw on Instagram where somewhere, some country in Africa, I think it's East Africa, correct me if I'm wrong, for those of you who know, um, they had a divorce ceremony, and uh, both families were invited. The man dressed up, the woman dressed up. They conducted it just like a wedding, but the difference here was the woman gave back her bride price, and she put it at the foot of the man and walked off, and she was fabulously dressed, and they had a party. But it still hurts because a lot of time, majority of the times when we get married, we are saying, this is somebody I care about. Now, I do understand there's sometimes you marry and you don't care for the person you're marrying. It does happen. But even in those instances, like in arranged marriages or forced marriages and things of that nature, or circumstantial marriages, emergency marriages, marriages in at the casino. People have a little bit too much to drink and they decide to get married. Okay. When you decide to go away and to separate from the person, there's still a little twinge because there's a part of us that looks hold on, let me fix this. Why? Hold on, TikTok people. Let me fix this. Okay. Because I don't know why. Okay, let's see if it's gonna charge now. Sorry about that. Because even though we're like, hey, I need to leave this person, there's still a part of us that wishes that it worked out. There's still a part of it that wishes that it worked out. Um, so there's grief, and many of us grew up with romantic ideas about marriage. And when we go through a divorce or separation, there is a damage to that image we had, that fantasy or dream we had about marriage. We thought it was going to be happily ever after. We thought we'll grow old together. We thought there weren't going to be any problems, that love will conquer all, and it doesn't happen. And so we grieve that. Okay. There's grief that comes from losing a pet. I mentioned that earlier. Especially if you're very close to that pet, if that pet was like a companion to you, you come home, and most pets, let's talk about cats and dogs. Excuse me, because I don't know how snakes behave. Some people have snakes and frogs, as pets. I've never had a pet snake or pet frog, so I don't know how they behave. Some people have pet lizards, and their lizards are happy to see them when they come home. Some people have pet hamsters, pet rabbits that are happy to see them when they come home. And so when they lose this pet, which which if they lose a pet which has been their companion, because these pets offer unconditional love. When you have a pet, the pet is happy to see you. The pet is happy to see you. You know, they're dancing around you. They're not judging you for how you look or how you speak, or they're just happy to see you. And so when that pet passes away, we're sad because we just lost one source of unconditional love. Okay. Some people have become so close to their pets that they've dispensed with other human beings. They're like, you know what? I don't need anybody else in my life but my pet. And so when that pet dies, they have a profound sense of grief. There are people who grieve nature. They're used to seeing their environment in one way, and after a while, there's extensive damage to the environment, and their way of life is erased or degraded, and they have a sense of grief. I also mentioned people who have grief that comes from illness, especially if a person um, has a terminal illness. Thank you, Zareen Buire. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. There are some people who have grief from illness, a chronic illness that wouldn't go away, or a terminal illness. And when I've worked in palliative care and I've worked with hospice, okay, and palliative care is when you provide comfort, medical comfort, to someone to allow them to pass with dignity. That's what palliative care is. I'm trying to break that down in a very simple way. You give them pain management, you care for them, you provide whole person care, including spiritual care, to make sure that the person passes with dignity. That's palliative care in a nutshell. And that's provided by a team, not just one person. Okay. So you will have people who are going through terminal illnesses because they are the ones who get this palliative care. And many of them might have a sense of grief. Oh, I wanted to spend more time on earth. I wanted to see my children get married. I wanted to see my children grow up. I wanted to see my grandchild grow up. I wanted to see, oh, I'm doing this, working on this project. I wanted to see it finish. I wanted to come to the end of that. Okay. Um, I don't want to leave my loved one or loved ones. And the person is in grief and it's painful because the person had in their mind how they wanted to be with their loved one or loved ones. And this terminal illness came about, and they're now not clearly not going to be able to spend time or be around for their loved ones. And one of the most painful things for me, I know there are probably some of you who are watching now or who will watch the replay later on YouTube and Facebook. For me, seeing such people cry triggers my own grief about things I will never experience, even though I don't have a terminal illness. But I'm listening to them speak and cry about what they're going to miss, what they're not going to experience. And I start thinking about what I myself I'm not going to experience, or what I used to experience and I no longer experience. And so their grief triggers my grief. But because I'm a healthcare professional, I have to remain professional and hold space for them to express their grief and witness their grief without me breaking down and forcing them to witness my grief. But there's sometimes caregivers or healthcare professionals end up in this almost symbiotic relationship with the patient because the patient is crying and the healthcare professional is crying, and they're crying for different reasons. Because your patient might be crying because of what they're leaving behind and what they're losing. And you, as a healthcare professional, you're crying because of what you've already lost. Okay? So everybody in the room is crying, but everybody in the room is crying for different reasons. That is grief. Okay? Now, when I had the touching base class yesterday, there was another kind of grief I didn't mention. There's a kind of spiritual grief I did not mention that I'd like to mention here. And there's a grief that we sometimes feel from a past incarnation. There's a grief that some of us sometimes experience from a past incarnation, and we carried it over from a past incarnation to this incarnation. And there are sometimes in this lifetime we have flashbacks to what happened to us in a previous lifetime. And there's some unresolved grief we have carried over from one incarnation to another incarnation. Um, there was a time in, I want to say it was 1997, I was watching television. I was in Canada. Yeah, I see that. And I remember they were showing V-Day celebrations in, I want to say it was in Germany, in France. They were showing V-Day celebrations, okay? And this is a celebration, a military celebration when the Allies defeated the other folks in the Second World War. And they were having all these people in military uniforms going through parades or marching and, military stuff. And I remember watching this, and when the camera zoomed in on one of the soldiers marching by, and I saw this guy's face. Now, he didn't have any expression on his face. It wasn't like he was crying or anything. You know how like they show a wide view and then they kind of zoom in so that you can see the details of the parade. And so the camera zoomed in on this guy marching and then the other people with him who were marching, and I just started crying. And I felt a huge amount of grief. And I started crying uncontrollably. I was by myself. It was like a portal had opened. That's the only way I can describe it. For me, it was like some kind of portal had opened. And I somehow knew I had participated in that war, in the Second World War. Now, Hey y'all, I wasn't born in the 1920s or earlier because those are the people who went to war. So don't y'all be looking at me like I'm 80 or 90 years old, okay? Excuse me. I got some water. So don't y'all be looking at me cross-eyed like, is she that old? No, I'm not that old. But the point I'm trying to make is there was something in that moment that as I watched that parade, some kind of portal opened up. And I knew in that moment that I somehow had been involved in that war, maybe as a soldier, I don't know. But I felt this overwhelming sense of grief. I started weeping. I started weeping. And I was kind of thankful that I was by myself because at that time I wouldn't have been able to explain to somebody why I was just watching TV of some celebrations in Europe and I'm weeping. And I remember weeping for about 5 minutes. And after that, I stopped. It was as if the portal just closed again. And then I was like, why am I crying? And that sense of grief dissipated. And I was sitting there going, why was I crying? Why did I feel this? Because I really felt it. And I started thinking, was I involved in the military in my past life or, what had happened? Okay. And sometimes when people go for past life regression and they start touching on their past lives, they tap into the grief of their past lives that they didn't know existed. Okay. I remember feeling a deep sense of grief when Princess Diana passed. I think that was also 97 or 98. I remember feeling a deep sense of grief. I didn't know her. But when I was watching the funeral proceedings and how people around the world have been putting out flowers and bouquets of flowers at the British High Commissions and British embassies and British consulates around the world for this woman, I was overwhelmed. I didn't know her, she didn't know me. And many people around the world tapped into that grief, especially if you were a mother. Imagine leaving your two little children behind for who to raise. Many of us tapped into that, and they showed William and Harry. And I remember weeping. Now, of course, they had royal nannies and royal teachers and royal uh, caregivers, and their father was there. But many of us still wept when we saw those children and we tapped into that. And there was a part of us that recognized the pain of that in our own ways. And people were crying around the world. And that's why people called her the Queen of Hearts. Even though, she had gone through the divorce with Charles and been stripped of this thing and the other, but people knew her as the Queen of Hearts. Okay. There is also some other kind of spiritual grief that comes from spiritual distress. We find that also in palliative care, with people with terminal illnesses or chronic illnesses that cannot be cured. And people are like, I've lived a good life, I've done everything I was asked to do. Why have I been stricken with this situation, with this illness? And no one can give them an answer. And they start getting angry. And they start getting angry at God or whatever, however they conceive God to be. There are people like that. They get angry. I've served you, God. I've done everything. I'm a nice person. I'm a good person. I help other people. Why am I suffering like this? And and then they have grief because they start looking at their lives and they're saying, so does it mean all these years I have served God have been in vain? And people don't want to think that. All the time they spent in their with their church or their religious organization, their mosque, their temple, does it mean all of that has been in vain? And so they have that sense of deep grief from that. Then there's the spiritual distress that comes from facing life's problems. The one that, in when you look at the Christian mystics, the a lot of them experience that. You look at the Islamic fathers, mothers, they experience that too, called the dark night of the soul. Some of you watching and who are watch this replay have experienced that dark night of the soul. Nothing is going right for you. Doesn't matter what you do. You've prayed, you've fasted, you've given charity to less fortunate people, you've given away your possessions. People in trouble, especially intractable troubles, trouble that they cannot resolve, will often give away their stuff. And there are sometimes religious organizations will take advantage of that. Unfortunately, or religious leaders will take advantage of that because they know that this person is having this problem that they can't resolve, and the person just is saying in their mind, let me give away my material possessions and see if this is going to help me resolve this issue. And if they belong to an unscrupulous religious organization, and by religious organization, I'm not just saying Christians, you have them in the Muslims and the Jews and the traditional indigenous religions, whatever it is, there are always people there who are waiting and watching for people who are grieving their problems, who are in spiritual distress. And they know that the person is like, if they say give it all up, the person's going to give it all up because they want to solve their problems. Many of us have been there. And when they've given all these things up and given them away, and the problem still remains with them, there's a profound sense of grief that comes upon the person because they're at this point they're saying, what else do you want from me? Do you want my life before I gain relief from this thing that is bothering me? Many of you have been through this. I have been through that myself. Just giving away stuff, hoping that if I keep on giving away these things that my problem will be resolved. And I found out that after giving away all those things, my problems weren't resolved. And I do have a video on my YouTube channel about the dark night of the soul. So if you'd like to explore this topic further, I invite you to go to my YouTube channel, Dr. Tochi, and look for that video called Dark Night of the Soul. It's a spiritual period of darkness in someone's life. It's been described as the heavens being like brass above the person. You're praying, but you don't get the sense that your prayers are going anywhere. You're fasting. You're doing, if you're into traditional religions, you're doing your rituals, you're doing spells, you're doing, all kinds of things, offerings, and nothing is working. Nothing. And you're paying other people to help you, and none of that is working either. Some of you who are familiar with the Judeo Christian traditions might remember the story of Job. Okay. If you go to the if you go to the Bible and to the Torah, you might remember the story of Job. Job also shows up in the Quran as Ayub. The story of Job is also told in the Quran as Ayub. And basically, that whole chapter on Job is about the dark night of the soul of a person, is an allegorical story of someone who went through the dark night of the soul and what he did to get through it and what he experienced as he went through it. So if you understand that story for what it is, it will guide you when you have that experience. Not if you have that experience, when you have that experience. Because experiencing the dark night of the soul has nothing to do with your social economic status, which is what that story illustrates. Because remember, Ayub or Job was wealthy. He was a very wealthy man. And he had wives, plural. He had children, plural. He had servants, plural. And according to the standards of his time, he was extremely wealthy. He had livestock, he had gold, he had jewelry, he had all kinds of things. But he was a very spiritual person. And he was aware that all these things could be taken away from him. And if you read his story, if you read his story, you will come across some of the conversations he had with himself and the people around him. He would offer sacrifices for his sons and daughters. And his rationale was, I don't know what they've done out there. I don't know who they may have offended. May have offended God, they may have offended other people through their words, thoughts, and deeds. So, as a preventative measure, I'm going to be offering these sacrifices on their behalf to atone for any mistakes my children may make out there. And that's a profound spiritual principle there, which deserves a class on its own. And I think, you know what? Let me get my notebook. I think this is a class that I should have with the members. So let me write that down. See why I said you need to have your notebook and your pen? Okay. So I've written it down. That's for my member class. So I put that down. So I'm going to put together that class for the member class. Okay. So he was doing, so when you look at that story, he was doing everything right. He was taking care of the needy. He was taking care of the indigent. He was feeding the hungry. He was being charitable. But one day, all of that was taken away from him. And his body was covered with sores. And his so he was afflicted financially, he was afflicted physically, he was afflicted psychologically, he was afflicted emotionally, because remember at some point he's there scraping his skin with broken shards of pottery just to get relief. He has sores on his body, so to get relief from the itching and the pain he'll be scraping his own skin. And his wife said to him, "Why live like that? Why not just curse God and die? There's no point living like this." And he said no. And his friends came to him and tried to convince him that his suffering was due to something that he did. And he said, "No, I will continue. I will continue with what I'm doing, with my path, with my spiritual path, and I will leave everything in the hands of the creator I serve. And if the creator I serve says, okay, time for you to come home, I'll go home. That's it. I've done everything I can do. I've done offerings for myself, my family, my wives, my kids. I had all these preventative measures. My preventative measures didn't work. I was hardworking. I was wealthy, and in the twinkling of an eye, everything got taken over and taken away from me. And that's fine. I will be here, sitting here in the dirt and in the dust until something happens. And we all know how that story ended, eventually ended. But what you might not pick up from that story was the deep level of spiritual distress that Ayub experienced. Imagine that you are going through a difficult situation and your spouse is just basically saying to you, "Why don't you just give up and die? What are you living for? Why are you fighting to just what? You know what kind of psychological pain that is? The person who's supposed to be encouraging you, supporting you, is telling you to give up. And there are people today who go through that. Unfortunately, members of their own family are not life affirming to them. There are people who live like that. Members of their family are not life affirming. Members of their family are like, just why don't you just give up and go and make space? Stop being a burden to the rest of us. And they're there saying, say who, say what. They do happen. Okay. They do happen. And that's painful. That's very painful because you're thinking, here's somebody who's supposed to be supporting me and helping me and encouraging me, and the person is telling me to hurry up and die and get out of the way. TikTok folks, let me put my charger in here. Okay. The person who's supposed to be encouraging you is discouraging you. And that provokes deep grief. It's painful. It's painful. Okay. Are you understanding what we're talking about so far? And let me do my check in. Y'all know how we do it. And let me check in with everybody. Are you understanding what I'm putting down here? Are you picking it up? What I'm putting down? Are you picking up what I'm putting down here? Are you understanding what we're talking about? Is it clear to you before I move forward? Because we don't want to leave anybody behind. Hi, Roma. Good to see you. Are we understanding what's going on? Okay. Thank you, Miss Allen. And then the TikTok folks are kind of quiet tonight. Okay. So the point I'm trying to make here is that grief can manifest in so many ways. If you find yourself crying, okay, thank you, Miss Mary. If you find yourself crying for no obvious reason, chances are you are grieving. You're by yourself, minding your own business, and you start crying. You start feeling emotional. There's a possibility that you're grieving. And there's something that needs to come up and come out of you so that you can start healing. But you've been suppressing it. And many of us suppress. Many of us suppress. Now is not a good time to cry. I'm busy. I don't want anyone to see me crying. I don't want people to think I'm weak. I don't want people to take advantage of me. So when that grief wells up in our hearts, we suppress it. Not today. Not right now. I'm busy. Hello, Trevor James. We suppress it. But then something happens. Remember, I told the story of watching Princess Diana's funeral, and I'm crying, just like millions of people around the world. Many of us tapped into that grief. Many of us tapped into the grief of the children. Thank you, Trevor James. Same to you. Many of us tapped into it. And that was a good example of community grieving. I would even call that um, a global grieving. People use the opportunity of that woman's death to cry and process their own grief. Thank you for the gift, Trevor James. So, this is what I want to say to you as we move forward with this chat. If you have the opportunity to grieve, dear one, don't waste it. Don't say to yourself, I don't know what people are going to say. You are the one with the grief, and you are the one who needs to express that grief. You are the one who's grieving, and you're the one who needs to express that grief. Don't be so concerned about what people may say. How you're, oh, if I start crying now, it's going to mess up my makeup. What's more important, your makeup or the fact that you have this pain in your heart and in your spirit? What's more important? You can always put on makeup later on. But we do sustain spiritual injury and spiritual trauma when we can't heal our grief. We sustain spiritual injury. And sometimes we may think, oh no, I don't feel, nah, it's not a big deal. And what kind of grief and injury? No, I'm a strong person. Until something happens and you react to it out of proportion. And I know that because I've been there. Somebody does something little to you and you want to wipe the person out. And everybody's looking at you and saying, what is wrong with you? Your reaction was out of proportion to what you experienced or what happened to you. So what, what's going on? No, it's this grief looking for an outlet. It's trying to escape. It's trying to get out because life is affirming. And so the universe and life is like, I want you to survive. I want you to do well. You have to have an outlet so that your life can be prolonged. There are some studies that have shown some correlation, and you can Google this for yourself. Okay? You don't have to take my word for it. You can Google it for yourself. There are studies that have shown a correlation between cancer and stress. And so you can have somebody who lives a healthy lifestyle and out of nowhere they're developing cancer. Out of nowhere. They don't have a family history of cancer and they just suddenly have this cancer. And they haven't been paying attention to the levels of stress that they have been experiencing. And they think just because Joe over there or Mary over there can do the job and they can tolerate the stress, I can tolerate it too. People are different. Everybody can tolerate different levels of stress. The levels of stress I can tolerate are different from the levels of stress that you can tolerate. And there's some people who think, oh no, all is well with me and nothing. But there's that something causing them stress in their body. And grief is a stressor. Grief is a stressor. And so nature's way is I want you to cry and wail and weep to mitigate the stress, to reduce the stress. And we're saying, no, I won't cry. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to wail. I'm not going to weep. I'm going to hold it all in. What do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen? Okay. So again, I repeat, if you feel sadness, to allow yourself to feel and express that sadness. And if you need to go into the bathroom to do that, that's okay. If you need to go into your car to do that, that's fine. If you need to go into the bushes to do it, that's fine. If you need to go to somewhere where nobody knows you to go express your grief and your pain, go do it. You might find it's a lot easier for you to go to somewhere where nobody knows you and cry and have strangers witness your grief for you, okay, than to have people who know you witness your grief. Some people are conscious about that. Some people are self conscious about that. Okay. Hello. Okay. Some people are self conscious about that. So go to where nobody knows you and express your grief, but it has to be expressed. If you have to cry, shout, wail, don't censor yourself. Don't be there saying there has to be a certain way to cry, a certain way to weep. There's no certain way. You cry, you wail, you weep until you feel better. And some people are lucky. They have good friends, they have good relatives who will cry with you. And they will cry for their own reasons, but at least all of you be crying or weeping together and lift that burden, that stress out of you. The expression of grief is very important. The expression of grief is very important. And if someone is saying to you, oh, man up, only weaklings cry, you need to get away from that person. Because what that person is telling you is not life affirming. You need to be able to cry. Now, from a spiritual perspective, I say to people, you might want to do a grief ceremony, okay? You might want to do a grief ritual. And sometimes you can do that through an ancestral healing ritual. Okay. Some of my advanced members, we've been through ancestral healing rituals. We just did one during the last seasonal change. I think we did it during the spring equinox. Okay. And we're going to do another one at the summer solstice. And there are times when we're conducting an ancestor healing ritual, we will cry. We will cry. And it's therapeutic because that's an appropriate time for us to cry individually and cry as a spiritual community. So you can organize those kinds of things. And in the class I did yesterday, the touching base class I did yesterday about the winter solstice, okay? If you need to watch that video, it's on my YouTube channel. Okay, winter solstice rituals. You will hear me talk about that in that class. That the winter solstice is a good time. That period of time is a good time to have these kinds of rituals and ceremonies. And if you can't find anyone to do it with, you can do it by yourself. Set up your ancestor altar. Those of you who are members, remember I did a class on how to set up and use your ancestor altar. We just did that last weekend. You can set it up, or you can set up your own altar, however you want to set it up. And you can take some time to start listing the things you have lost. And don't hold back. Who have you lost? What jobs have you lost? What relationships have you lost? What dreams have you lost? What have your illnesses cost you? What unanswered spiritual issues do you have? What are the things that cause you pain? Physically, materially, psychologically, emotionally, financially, spiritually? What causes you pain? And you take time and list all these things. You list them. And then while you're there at your altar, you start going over it. And to feel, allow yourself to feel what you feel. And if that means you have to cry, if it means you have to wail and weep, if you don't have an altar or you're in a situation where you can't have an altar, you can get into your car. I've done this before. Get into the car and go on the freeway. Put down the windows of the car and drive on the freeway, not on the streets, but on the freeway, and cry and scream and wail. Because when you're on the freeway, you're less likely to have someone looking at you saying, "Why is this person inside their car screaming and wailing?" Because you're on the freeway, everybody driving fast. Now, if you get into the regular streets and you put your window down and you're screaming and wailing and carrying on, uh, they might call the popo. They say somebody needs help. She's up in her car screaming and wailing. Or if you don't want to do that, you can go to a parking lot, the commercial parking lot. Just park by yourself and cry and feel better. Just cry and feel better. But I like the idea of setting up a ritual altar for this. Because when you set up your altar, you can you can call on your spiritual crew to witness you and to comfort you. as you experience and express this grief. And there's sometimes I have to do that. If my family is not around me at the time, because my family, we're all spiritual practitioners, okay? So they know what to do. But if I'm in a situation where I'm the only person at home, I will go to my altar and I'll invite my spiritual crew and I will say to them, "This hurts me." And then I will cry. I'll cry. And I'll cry as long as it takes for me to cry. And I'm not going to be there trying to look cute and pretty. I'm at my altar. I bring my authentic self to my altar. That's why when I have people do rituals with me, I say, forget about the wigs and the lashes and the nails and the makeup. Come as you are. There's no time for all of that. Come as you are. Because when we have all this fancy hair and nails and makeup, we're concerned. Oh, I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to look a certain way. So that's why I say, if you're going to do a ritual with me, dispense with all of those things so that you can be free. So that you can be free and do what you need to do. Okay. You can also go speak with a spiritual counselor. The spiritual counselor, and you tell the person you're going through some grief. The person should have some assessments they can give you to do to see if it's the kind of thing they can handle or if they need to refer you to someone else. There are people who are grief counselors. There are people who go and study that grief counseling. And what they do is they counsel people through their grief. They will give you an assessment, find out what kind of grief you have, and give you tools for handling it. In this live, I'm just giving you a couple of things you can do by yourself to handle it. But if you find that you need more help, you may need to go to a grief counselor. You may need to go to a grief counselor because they will have resources and they will have more things in their toolbox they can give you that can help you process that. There are some people who need to talk through what hurts them before they can grieve. They need to have certain things addressed before they can grieve. So not everybody can start crying and wailing and weeping at the drop of a hat. There are people who need to talk it through. And then as they talk it through, they allow their brain to start processing that information, and then they're able to start letting out that grief. Because there's sometimes we could be sad and in pain, and we don't know why we're sad, and we don't know why we're in pain. We have no idea. We don't remember. There are many times we don't remember. There, let me give an example. There are times that children will experience painful events. Okay, But because they need to survive and move on, and there's no time or space for them to grieve, they will suppress that memory. But you find that this person is going through life with this sense of loss and sadness. And because they've repressed it from their conscious memory, they know they're sad about something. They know they're grieving. They need to grieve something, but they can't remember what it is because they didn't have the time or the space to process that. And so they repress the memory and they grow to be adults. And so when they go for grief counseling, all these things are dug up so that they can now face it and grieve properly. For example, there are some children, maybe their mother passed when they were very young, or their father passed when they were very young, and they had to take on that adult responsibility. There was no time for them to be a child. They had to step up and become the adult, regardless of their age. There are many people like that. They became a mother before they were ready to be a mother. They had to be a mother to their siblings. Some kids have to be the father of the house. And they had to figure it out as they went along. And they didn't have the time and the space to grieve the loss of their mother or their father. All they knew was that, okay, mom passed or dad passed, and someone needs to step up and start taking responsibility, start taking care of the family, and help to bring in income and help to take care of the young ones. And so it's go, 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 go. And then they have to repress. They start repressing those feelings, they start repressing those memories. But more often than not, it starts presenting as problems in the person's adult life. And somebody says, "Why are you so cold? Why are you so detached?" Because that's their coping mechanism. They didn't have the opportunity to grieve the loss of their parent. They didn't have the opportunity to grieve the loss of their guardian. So they had to suppress all those things, compartmentalize their feelings so that they could move forward. So you see them as an adult, they're functioning, they might be doing well materially, but they're cold. People see them as being heartless. And this person is heartless. They're not heartless, they're protecting their heart. A lot of people who we perceive to be heartless are protecting their own hearts. That's how they protect their hearts. They can't afford to have you come too close. And a lot of them hold on to grief, unimaginable grief, that if you gave them the safe space and place to tell it, it would chill your bones. It would chill your bones. Look at some military leaders, political leaders, dictators, and people of that nature. Here's some homework for you to do. Go look for some military dictators, political dictators, and do a research on their childhood. find out how they were born. True, Nikki, police officers too. Go find out how they were born and their childhood, how they lived as a child. And you will start understanding why they had to steel their hearts. They had to make their hearts like steel. They had to cage their hearts and cage their emotions. Just do your research. And I'm recommending public figures because it's a lot easier to get information on public figures. How did they grow up? You know, what were their circumstances surrounding their birth and their childhood and their young experiences. And I'm not saying it's all, but a lot of them you will find had horrific childhoods. Some of them had to fight to eat. Some of them had to fight to eat. And they were not given the opportunity to express grief or express their pain or their feelings. And so they're like, okay, if this is how the world is, if this is how the world plays its game, I'm going to excel at this game of coldness. And I'm going to excel at this game of repression. And no one will ever know. And no one, I will not give anyone the opportunity to feel sorry for me or to pity me. Because when I needed pity, I did not get pity. When I needed sympathy, I did not get sympathy. Therefore, that which was done to me, I will do to others. Some of you might have heard this saying, instead of doing unto others as you wish them to do to you, there's this other saying, do unto others as they have done unto you. That's their own maxim, how they live their life. I'm going to do unto others as they have done to me. I'm not going to do unto them as I want them to do to me. I'm going to deal with them the way that they have dealt with me. You're right, low beauty. Everyone shall pay. Energy. I will spare no one. Since I was not spared, since I was not pitied, since I was not helped, everyone shall pay. I agree. Okay. There's a lot of unexpressed grief there. And that's why you will see with some of these people, that's why you will see with some of these people, if there's someone in their life that allows them to show that side of them and allows them to grieve privately and with dignity, they'll be like this with the person. And it doesn't matter what that person does, they'll be like, no, I'm going to defend this person. I'm going to be with this person. I don't care what you think about this person. And that's why you'll see some of them, they will have a wife. The wife may not be glamorous. The wife may not be fashionable. The wife may not be, you know what I mean? But because she allowed him, if it's a man, or if, it also happens the other way around, the man was able to hold that space for her to grieve and did not betray her trust. Or the woman did not betray his trust. There's nothing you will say about that person they'll believe. Even if that person is out there being a monster, they will say, I am not interested, because that person held space for them, listened to them, did not judge them. And so you're looking at the person and saying, but this person is a dictator, but they love this wife. This person is a narcissist, but they love this husband. They will not leave this man alone, or they will not leave this woman alone. And you're on the outside trying to get to know them. They're not interested because they already have somebody else who has held space for them and has not betrayed that space and the truth. There was a short video I put out a while ago where I shared a technique that is helpful for viewing angry people. When somebody is angry at you, thank you for the gift, Low Beauty. Thank you so much. If you see somebody who is aggravated and angry for no reason, they're like a chihuahua. Anyone who comes near, they're. I said there's a technique you can use to deal with them so that you don't take it personally. Just see them as if they're in a cage. And people are coming at that cage and throwing things at them and pouring things at them, and they're like, are you going to go there and throw something at the person? Are you going to go there and pour something on the person, knowing that the person is in a cage? And many of us are in cages, but we don't know that we are in cages. And we're angry, we're in pain, we're grieving, we're enraged. But we're in a cage. Now, there's one kind of loss I was going to mention in it, and I just remembered it now. There's one kind of loss that causes grief with people, the loss of their innocence. Loss of innocence. And I would like to talk about that tomorrow because that's a whole area in itself. So, the loss of innocence. Let me write it down. So, we'll do a part two to this class. Okay. So, I wrote it down in my notebook. Let's talk about that tomorrow. A source of profound grief for people is a loss of innocence. And that can happen physically, emotionally, psychologically, intellectually, and spiritually. Okay? So I will catch up with everyone tomorrow. Any one or two questions about today's topic, not about anything else, about today's topic you would like me to answer, about what we've discussed so far? Not about any other topic, but about today's topic. Today's topic is how to use spiritual means to deal with your grief, especially spiritual grief. So I can answer one or two questions before I call it a night. Have you learned anything in today's chat? Okay, how do you let a person know that they can open up emotionally? That cannot be forced, unfortunately. The person has to trust you, and you have had to show them reasons to trust you. That's a very good question, Nikki. Most people who hold grief that transforms them into negative people have trust issues because it was trust issues that made them the way that they are. The people who that they trusted betrayed them. And so that's why they have become narcissistic. That's why they have become oppressors. That's why they've become dictators. Trust issues. So the people who were their parents or guardians let them down. And so this is how they see the world. They see the world as a place of betrayal. So for them to trust you, you have to do a lot of work. And so you have to ask yourself, am I willing to do that work? And how long do I want to keep at it? Most of us don't have the patience for that. If it's going to take 10 years for someone to trust you, are you willing to put in 10 years of your life trying to get someone to trust you? Now, there are some people who are manipulators, okay? There are some people who are good at human psychology and they can get that person to trust them faster because, they know how to make people to open up and trust them. But chances are, if someone is a manipulator, they're also going to betray these people and it will make them worse. So if you are sincere about holding space for such a person, it's going to take time. It's going to take effort. And you need to be sincere with yourself. Do you have what it takes to stay the course? This is the reason why Samuel L. Jackson's wife is with him. She stayed the course. This is the reason why Denzel Washington's wife stayed with him. She stayed the course. You're looking at people that put in 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. Go read Samuel L. Jackson's story. Now, it would be very difficult for him to leave his wife. She saw everything and endured everything. But but he knows now, after all those years, that he can trust her. Same thing with Denzel Washington. What if random people approach you and dump their personal info on you? So what's the question? I don't understand what the question is. What is the question? Roma, so true. I cried for Princess Diana. Many of us did cry for Princess Diana. Many of us cried because we identified with her. We identified with that sense of. Remember back in the day, they were saying that when Charles married Diana, she was a virgin, and many of us identified with that. So here you are, someone of the royal family who was minding her business. She was a kindergarten teacher, nursery teacher, or something like that. And she got picked. And Charles wanted somebody else. The person, Camilla, the person he's with now, that's who he wanted. But his mother wouldn't agree to it. And they were like, no, she's married, she's divorced, and blah, blah, blah. That's who he wanted. And they said no. So they arranged a marriage with Diana and took her out of her lane to make her something else. And she put her heart and soul into it and she obeyed. She was a picture of obedience. And it didn't end well for her. So I think a lot of us, especially as women, identified with that because there's so many of us who have been obedient to our families, but it still didn't work out for us. And as a source of grief. And we'll talk about that tomorrow when we talk about the loss of innocence, because that's what happened to Diana. That's what happened. And many of us as women identified with that. I have done everything you told me to do. I have done everything you've ordered me to do. I have done everything you've commanded me to do. Why am I not having the outcomes that I want? Why am I having these strange outcomes? And there are many women like that who are married young. There are some women I know, they were married at 15, 16, 17, 18 by wealthy men. And the men married them young because, they like young women, and they wanted a young woman to have children for them. And they have multiple children with these women. And they say, well, I'm going to give you a rich life. I'm going to care for you and everything. And the person gets older and then they get angry. They get older and then they get angry. I have an aunt in her 90s now. She eventually left her husband in her 50s or 40s or 50s. And she was married very young. I think she was married when she was 12 or 13 because that's what they used to do back in the day. Thank God they don't do that now here, but there's still some places. Go to Afghanistan or Uzbekistan, those stand places. There are many communities in Africa that still do it, even in South America. Young girls are getting married off at 12, 13, and everybody around them is telling them, oh, yeah, it's great, it's fantastic. You're so lucky. So many of us cry. I don't understand the question, low beauty. Would that be considered the same as trusting a person to transmit their pain? I'm not. What exactly is the question? I don't understand your question. I'm kind of confused. Can you put it in a simple sentence? I'm not too smart. I'm just a simple woman. I'm not too smart. So can you put it in a simple sentence? One sentence. Put the whole thing in one sentence so I can understand it. Okay. So any more questions about today's topic? Yeah, Nikki is sad, but that's how the patriarchal structure works. The man is always centered. In the patriarchal structure, the man is always centered. And so if you have the man centered, the woman is decentered. You're not as important. And so that's why you have certain women who have learned how to play the system. Okay. Some of you may have heard of Shira 7, and her theme is teaching women how to beat the patriarchal system. Does that take care of grief? No. But If you look at some of the stuff she shares or teaches, she's like, disengage, learn how to be cold blooded, get the bag, cry in a Rolls Royce instead of crying in a Honda Civic. So basically, she's just teaching women how to play the patriarchal structure. But it still doesn't mean that women don't have grief. And there are young boys that also have grief. And the young boys that have grief, some of them, they were betrayed by women, betrayed by their mothers, betrayed by the female figures in their lives. So guess which way they're gonna swing. Same thing with women. There are women who have had so much grief or have witnessed so much grief from the hands of men that they swing the other way. Because in their minds, they're like, if a man can inflict so much pain on a woman, I have no business with a man. And there's some young men who are like, if women can inflict so much pain on a man, I have no business with women. And there's a lot of grief there that remains unexplored. A lot of grief that remains unexplored. And people are so concerned about, well, why are you living this lifestyle? Well, but there's grief there that has not been explored. And finger pointing and name calling and all that kind of thing. There are some women who treat their sons so dreadfully because of what their husbands or male partners put them through, and they take it out on their sons. And there's some fathers that take it out on their daughters because of what their wives or girlfriends put them through. So you see, it becomes like a generational grief thing. It becomes generational grief. This generation creating grief for this generation, creating grief for the next generation, creating grief. And you're having these generations creating grief for each other. So some people are like, you know what? If I'm going to be living aggrieved, if I'm going to be living with so much grief and there's no one who's going to, yes, you know, if no one is going to help me through this, I might as well focus on getting the bag. I'm going to be angry, I'm going to be hurt, I'm going to be grieving, but at least I'm going to be rich. And so you find that with dictators, oppressors, with uh, uh, people of that nature, narcissists. I don't have any other way to deal with my grief, and people don't care about my pain. So I'm going to get the bag. And how did, let me see here. Remember that comment? Um, Low Beauty made that comment. Everyone shall pay energy. Everyone shall pay. There's a lot of grief there. So I want us to start thinking about what we've talked about in today's class, okay? And start asking yourself, how can I start letting out that grief that is causing me blockages and and problems in my life? Because Sometimes grief can prevent you from doing the things you want to do in your life. And there are a lot of times you will find grief and shame walking hand in hand. Grief and shame walking hand in hand. And it will keep people from doing what they want to do or what they need to do. What will people say? Who's going to laugh at me? Who's going to mock me? Who's going to make fun of me? Who's going to put me on blast? Who's going to call me out? If people look at me and how I appear and my lifestyle, are they going to laugh? Are they going to look down on me? I'm not measuring up. Are people going to think that I'm too needy? Are people going to feel that I can't hold my own? I'm always needy. And so you have somebody who used to be needy, they train themselves to become unneedy. They train themselves to become hard. Many of us went through that. Okay, all right. So no more questions. So low beauty, I was waiting for you to reframe that question so I could get it, but you can bring it tomorrow. We'll address it tomorrow because I really didn't understand it. So, and you know, I'm not exactly the brightest bulb in the room. Okay. I'm just a simple woman. So remember, for consultations, if you want to book a consultation with me, please go to my website at tochi.us. I also have a plethora of practical spirituality videos on the platform where you're watching me now, on my YouTube channel. Okay. There's no need for you to suffer when there are tools and resources out there to help you. Okay. Ooh, thank you, Nikki. Thank you for the roses. I appreciate you. We're thankful to our Creator, our guardian spirits, our ancestors, and our spirit guides for today's community together. And we're thankful for this safe space. Ashe, Ise, Inyenho. Thank you, Kamagu, Kozu, Lesedi, Aibobo. Thank you for coming. I'll see y'all tomorrow. I'll try my best to show up by 8. If I can come on earlier, I will come on earlier. I think I might hop onto TikTok during the day. Let me see. Because tomorrow is a light day for me. It's like surprisingly light. I don't have like, I think I just have one consultation tomorrow. So tomorrow I have more freedom. So I might hop onto TikTok during the day just to see what's going on. Okay. Love you all.